Dustin Palmer, who is going to close out our summit, presenting on how tech can improve our safety nets. So Dustin leads the US program for GiveDirectly, an NGO that has delivered more than $900 million in cash into the hands of over 1.7 million people living in poverty. Dustin was also the director of the Safety Nets team at Code for America, where they used tech and design principles to facilitate enrollment in safety nets. Dustin, welcome.
Thank you all, appreciate it. Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around this long. Hopefully we can close out on some good energy. My name's Dustin, I'm really happy to be here today. Has anyone heard of GiveDirectly before? I see a couple hands. Has anyone donated to GiveDirectly before? A bunch of hands, that's awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I was a donor to GiveDirectly like 10 years before I joined it, and I think it's a really cool org, but this isn't a sales pitch for that. I'm gonna give you like 3 kind of touchstones of cool ways that technology is helping improve safety nets just at the delivery front where implementation happens. So let me get this going. Really quickly, GiveDirectly, like almost said, we're closing in on $1 billion delivered to people mostly in extreme poverty, mostly overseas, but I run our US programs where we also do cash transfers to low-income people in a variety of ways. If you don't know, cash is the most studied anti-poverty intervention. There have been over 300 RCTs, there have been more than 30 independent studies of our work, and at most dimensions, it beats any other way you want to try to intervene to support someone. So it's really relevant for the safety net and for some of the conversations today. Like I said, I'm going to jump into 3 quick case studies. The first one, I was at an organization called Code for America for about 5 years using tech and design to improve government services. So the first one will come from that, and the next 2 are around GiveDirectly. So there's a lot of text on the screen, but we're just going to kind of talk through it. Essentially, a lot of our safety net programs, we spend a lot of money, like from Nick's presentation earlier, but it doesn't always get to people, and it's really hard to grab, and that leaves these giant participation gaps in a number of programs. So for instance, food assistance, maybe 1 in 5 people who are eligible do not get food assistance, even though the money is allocated and there for them. It's not kind of a zero-sum pie, it's there. The Women, Infant, and Children Nutrition Program, a key nutrition program for infants, it's like a 50% participation rate. I could go on and on. So there's this big opportunity to work at the front of just connecting people to what's out there already. This slide's in reference to the United States. There are tens of billions of dollars a year left on the table. There's a number of reasons for that. I think we heard a little bit about them today, so I won't spend a ton of time. But I want to tell you about a quick case study. I led a project where we looked for the most challenging application to get and secure public benefits. We thought that was in Minnesota. I did this big survey. You can check it out. It's called the Field Guide to Benefits. I'm sure you can find it. But essentially, it was taking people more than an hour to apply to 9 of the most critical safety net benefits in the state. You can only do it over a desktop computer, only in English. Just a bit of a mess in a lot of ways, and that drove big gaps. What we did was bring in a modern kind of product delivery team, but partner with the state from day one to say, let's build something from the ground up using all of these modern delivery principles, something that the state will own and run after we leave, long after we leave. Fast forward through lots of iterations, rollouts, a pandemic, a global pandemic that took us back a little bit. But over the span of about 1.5 years, we built something called MN Benefits. You can check it out online. There are demos. You can find any of these things. But essentially, it takes people about 14 minutes to apply for benefits now in Minnesota. It's multilingual, works on the phone. You can take pictures of your documents. It's kind of what we might expect in the private sector for accessing some sort of service. Beyond that, though, the state now runs it. And so we were doing like test-driven development. It's open source. It's on GitHub. We were doing releases averaging more than once a week together. And years later, with the state still owning it, it's one of the best in the country. And they're still doing releases like once or twice a month the last time I checked. And it's kind of standing the test of time of a new way to deliver. So it's the same folks that built that clunky one maybe 20 years ago have now accelerated into something that's much better. So why does it matter? The result is that I don't know if anyone's from Minnesota, no shade, but it's not like the biggest state ever. I say this from Indiana, so I'm also not from a huge state, but I live here in California now. Even at that, about 1 million people a year use this application to secure about $500 million in benefits. So there's enormous leverage. I think that's one of the insights of the civic tech world broadly around technology and government services and sort of what we've talked about today. And I think the broader lesson from this case study is just that there's things out there that we can make better, and probably there's elements of that with SafetyWing, and there's elements of that with what other people work on. This kind of incrementalist approach can have big opportunities. Okay, next example. We are currently running the world's largest and longest universal basic income experiment. This is in Kenya. This is with GiveDirectly. We have this incredible commitment to rigorous evidence. We're founded by economists, and our brand is sort of transparency and efficiency. So if you give us $1, we're going to get at least 85 cents of it to somebody in rural Kenya who may be entirely, not only unbanked, but they may have never accessed a cell phone or things like that. It's people in extreme poverty. If you don't know nonprofit world, that's like a very good rate, and that's why we get a lot of people supporting us. We're running an experiment right now across almost 300 villages in Kenya, not people, but villages, representing around 35,000 people. There's 4 arms. Just hang with me on the wonky part of this for a second. One group is getting monthly payments, a universal basic income for 2 years, and it's about $30 to $50 a month. It's raising them above that extreme poverty line. The next group is getting the exact same payments, but for 12 years. So they have a much longer horizon, and in the end, it'll be worth much more because it's the same monthly value. The third group is getting 2 years worth of payments up front on day 1. And then there's a fourth group that's a control group. And a lot of times people are like, but don't they deserve money too? And they do, and we'll get to them. But for the purposes of learning, and when there's not enough resources to go around, we're comfortable with these kind of randomized control trial designs because they tell us a ton. We have just released some results on this about a year ago. We measured outcomes at year 2. So the first 3 arms all have gotten the exact same amount of money. Before I move on, any guesses which group is the most effective? Who's doing the best 2 years in? I see one hand way back there.
The guys that got money up front.
The upfront, the lump sum. Anyone disagree? Anyone have another guess? You could say the control group and say, GiveDirectly, your model's totally broken. What are you doing? You're causing harm. That's correct. It's the lump sum group. So all 3 groups that have money, are receiving money, are getting statistically significant improvements. They're able to invest in income-generating assets, shift into different parts of the economy rather than kind of precarious day labor. They're able to start small businesses, etc. But the lump sum group looks step-level different. They're able to start much more different kinds of businesses. They're able to move, invest, do different things. And even interestingly, the 12-year group, so they've received the exact same amount of money in the exact same form. They're basically converting it to a lump sum by joining savings groups or accessing investment instruments that let them do something with that lumpier amount of cash. The part that's, I think, most interesting about this is basically the exact opposite of how safety net works today. Most of our safety net, if you're in a rich or a poor country, is monthly, it's conditional, it's uncertain. The benefit themselves are quite restricted or maybe in kind. So for instance, food assistance in this country, you can't get food at a restaurant. There's lots of types of food you can't get with the assistance. It's actually even narrowing more recently as we passed waivers for it only to be allowed on healthy food, for instance. So the utility is going down. What GiveDirectly has really proven in about a decade and a half of work is that people know what they need to solve their problems, and their problems are different across people, and so giving them cash is the most effective way to support them. But what we're learning is upfront cash is what really matters, and I think this challenges a lot of our thinking on the best way to support people. So I'll leave you with that. Let me go to one more example, and then I know we're going to do a little bit of Q&A, and welcome Q&A from the crowd. So I'll preface this with, I'm not a crypto expert. My hand was only up for like the first 3 questions of that panel, I think. But we are interested in crypto for a number of reasons, and we just started a program in New York. This is a program my team's running. Our US team is actually really quite big. We've delivered over $300 million to date, with much more coming. This is in New York. It's kind of a trial we're doing with Coinbase. They had a project called Give Crypto. It turns out it's really hard to implement cash programs, and they partnered with us after a little bit to do it. I don't know if anyone works at Coinbase here, but we're super grateful for the partnership. We launched this in the Bronx and Harlem for a number of reasons, but essentially cash is available to low-income New Yorkers. We went with young adults, 30 years and under. There's a lottery to select them, and they're going to receive 6 payments, 2 kind of smaller sums, and then the third payment's like a bigger lump sum following a lot of this evidence we've just talked about. and then a few more monthly payments to kind of off-ramp. But it's 100% delivered as USDC, a stable coin, into a Coinbase wallet. There's a boba shop around the corner that accepts USDC. Like, you can kind of use it in a few places, but that's not why we're doing it. We're more interested in delivery and longer run implementation reasons. The actual studies and evaluation results will come out soon once this program's over, but already off the bat, we're learning a lot. So it cost us 26 cents to deliver the first month of payments in terms of transfer fees, not per payment, but for all of the payments, because it's quite cheap to do these things this way. That might not seem that important, but when we're operating where we're at an 85% or higher efficiency of turning donors' dollars into direct cash for people, reducing those transfer fees, we generally work through telecom providers who do mobile money across African countries and in Asia and in disasters. That's actually really meaningful. That means we can go to you all who might donate and say, actually, we got to 87% of this program because we're able to essentially zero out that part of implementation. The other thing that's really cool is we've had 100% delivery rate. This is our first time doing this. We didn't know what to expect. We did a lot of onboarding with recipients, but people are savvy and the payments are going out. Our work is not like a 5 nines kind of work. Payments fail all the time, especially for people at kind of lower income using products that don't work that well, or because they have changing life circumstances. Low-income people have really rich financial lives and they're doing a lot of different things at once. They might need to change their cards or things like that. And so our goal internally is like 95% plus payment rate, and every payment delivered successfully. So that's already exciting for us. We work in places with really high inflation rates, across borders. We're learning a lot in this program that I think will be applicable down the road. I think I'll leave you with that. The one other thing I'll just mention really quickly on that lump sum, I forgot to mention for the lump sum example, we've moved all of our programming to lump sum, except for sort of legacy programs that are concluding in the experiment in Kenya, putting our money where our mouth is, following what's most effective. We just had research come out last month in Kenya again, where families who were pregnant when they received, it's just $1,000 transfer up front in that case, or the equivalent in Kenyan shillings. Infant mortality dropped 48% in a randomized control trial of this. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, public health departments spend enormous amounts of money to move core outcomes like that, and we're seeing if you get people cash, they're able to take care of themselves. And we know some of the mechanisms were around proximity to health clinics, so there's things that matter in addition to cash. But again, if you just get it to people, you can see something really dramatic. And at the end of the day, cash is underused in our safety nets, and so if we're thinking about the future of safety nets, I think there's enormous opportunities around cash and the ways we deliver it. Let me just stop there, and we'll have a question or two, and then I think there's some closing thoughts after that. But thank you everyone so much for your attention and being here.
Thank you so much, Dustin. That was fascinating, and you guys are just like doing such high impact work. I guess I want to just pick up on that lump sum thought. So why do you think that countries currently don't offer this kind of safety net benefit? And like, what do you think are some solutions to the obstacles of those policy obstacles?
That's a great question. I think it's scary to offer a lump sum. I think even for our donors who are excited for us to take risk and learn, giving somebody a bunch of money up front feels like they'll waste it. We have deep evidence that people do not waste cash. They don't spend it on temptation goods. They don't reduce work. It's a bolster to get them to kind of a higher level of economic earnings. I think it's also just a bit unprecedented. The systems aren't set up that way. Tax returns are like a little bit of that model,
right?
But it's not there. We have another program in Georgia that's supporting low-income people, and we flipped a second version of it to offer a lump sum people could pick, and 2/3 of people picked a lump sum of the equivalent amount. And so people want lump sums. If we truly follow that endpoint of trusting people, that's what people are telling us they can do the most with.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think, like, what do you think are the obstacles for more generally, like, countries or private institutions adopting these universal basic income programs or cash transfer programs at scale? Like, why is that not more widespread when the results are so clear?
It's a really good example. I'm glad we had the safety net grounding presentation earlier, so I don't have to go super into it.
Yeah.
But essentially, like in the US, our safety net is an accumulation of fragmented programs. There are more than 80 federal programs, much less local. I think it would be wonderful to consolidate and put those resources into cash payments to people. But the barriers are because mundane things like their administered in different departments. The organogram of a government really defines your experience, and there might be different eligibility requirements. Just a fun fact, 2 of the most important safety nets in the US are Medicaid health insurance for low-income people and food assistance, and they define what a household is completely differently. So you might be applying with a group of people for one, people who live in your house and eat food with you, and the Medicaid one is based on your tax arrangement, and those aren't the same household. So imagine how difficult it is to bridge that and do kind of an upfront combining the payments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today we've been talking a lot about global social safety nets, or a kind of global system of income redistribution, and GiveDirectly obviously operates in, what is it, like 20 countries, something like that?
Yeah, we're in about a dozen countries, but we do humanitarian relief, so we'll deploy sort of anywhere in the US including. So we are in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
I think something, if you've heard any TED Talks of our founders or others, despite the enormous sums from Derek's presentation, I really like Derek's thoughts on this wider vision. If we just zero in on the places with the most extreme poverty,
Mm-hmm.
we really do have the capacity, if we could funnel current philanthropic giving to just the poorest of people in the world, there's ways for us to lift up from this private side.
Right.
But I think we don't think the vision is, like, GiveDirectly administers a wealth fund. I think governments really do need to be part of the bigger solution.
So you're kind of more like on the perspective of, like, governments have this role of administering these wealth funds, and like, or yeah, I guess, what is your thinking about like a global system of redistribution versus like working directly with governments for these cash transfer programs?
Yeah, I think it's, first, I think reasonable people could disagree and take different sides of this. It's
For
kind
sure.
of speculative, futurist, but I do tend towards the government, maybe just my background. We've tried to do that in the GiveDirectly work, so a second version of a program we're running in Illinois that supports homeless families, again with a lump sum, which is just not really happening in the US, but we're
Right.
doing it. In the second version, we had the government do the payment slice of delivery. We owned everything else, because we're trying to build pathways for governments to be able to deliver this way. And that was super cool to see a major state say, we're willing to come with you out and do something lump sum, and we're willing to build towards permanency by kind of offboarding parts of like the delivery stack, for lack of a better word.
I guess like a concern that Derek brought up, that has been brought up in general today, is like, if you institute these like global systems of redistribution, there will be some element of corruption, especially if you're working with governments. Do you think that like private institutions have a role there in helping with that redistribution? Is it NGOs? Like, what is the best way to tackle that problem?
Really good question. We've had fraud and corruption at GiveDirectly, so not going to shame anyone who has fraud or corruption issues. Part of our brand has been being really transparent about when that happens and explaining to donors what percentage has gone to that. I don't think the optimum level of fraud is 0. There's trade-offs in combating fraud around inclusion and expense and things like that. I do think governments are where there is where we're working on questions of value, and there's sort of democratic oversight in a way that's exciting. At the same time, I'm open to things we're learning, like in the Coinbase project, which is where things are on-chain and visible, and there might be ways that we can bring new levels of transparency that I don't think the state of Illinois is going to deliver on crypto tomorrow, even if we're getting them to deliver in cash now. So there's upsides for some of these private solutions too.
Yeah, and I guess like switching over a little bit to your work at Code for America, I guess I've just been thinking a lot. I work on the visa product here at SafetyWing, where we're trying to help our users apply to remote work visas in a more simple way. And like from that work, I've realized how little incentives governments have to make their user interfaces or their processes like enjoyable or like even usable. And I know that was like a big focus of you guys at the Safety Nets team at Code for America. Do you think, or like, what do you think is the role of like private institutions, private organizations in, applying those product principles to governments? Like, would you like to see more of that, and what do you think are the biggest gaps there?
Really good question. It's super complicated. I know there's some experts in the room too from kind of the civic tech world. So it's sort of this thorny knot of a million things that constrain governments, from hiring to the technology they have to just the policy oversight. I think it's worth not losing track of the differences. Governments have to serve every user for the most part, like often on day one. So it's very difficult to iterate and kind of find product market fit. That's not even relevant for like the US Post Office, right? Like we need to get to everyone. So it's just a different incentive set for governments, and sometimes that results in like the lowest common denominator interfaces or things like that. Just one slice of the challenge. The Code for America founder, Jen Polka, has an awesome book called Recoding America. It came out a year or two ago. That would be worth a read for anyone. I think it's really well done of what some of these challenges are. But for private institutions, I think like an org like Code for America or a private company, there's a ton of private companies that deliver government services in America. We contract things out. There's an ability to take on some risk and show what's possible. That's like a big rallying cry of the civic tech world a lot of times, and help governments get there versus just washing your hands and saying you have these giant bets to make of refactoring the IRS system or something like that. Like, let's build a way to do that.
Sure. And I guess just to kind of close us off, there's a lot of builders in the room, a lot of people with like technical capacities, and like obviously in Silicon Valley, people are very tech savvy. What are some like projects or things you wish that more people were working on or building that you think could really improve either the way that we administer safety nets or cash transfers in general?
That's a really good question. Before this work, I lived internationally. I was on like 5 different visas, none of which were applicable to my situation when I was in Myanmar. So I do think there's like the problem you all are working on is spot on, and you can write me a check later or whatever. No, I'm just teasing. In the U.S., I think there's an enormous like tech debt of some of these systems, and a lot of them are in Minnesota. There's like a COBOL backend, and there's this who's going to write COBOL in 10 years, and some of that's a little overblown because I think ATMs run on COBOL. Like there's a lot of myths you uncover as you get in the weeds of delivery, but I think that the user-facing piece, and then taking the implementers, the people behind the scenes, the caseworkers who are issuing the payments, it's just as miserable for them. It's probably more miserable for them than it was for you to apply for Medicaid, is the person on the backside who has to process that. So I think there's a big opportunity there for tech folks to work on. There's also a million on-ramps. There's an org called US Digital Response that matches tech volunteers with government projects on a volunteer capacity.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's all sorts of orgs. We're hiring engineers. We build our own tech, so you can come work for us or any of our kind of peers. There's a lot out there if you're interested in these problems.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dustin.
Thank you.
This was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you all.